by probing beneath the surface, we will discover a layer of intrigue and of meaning and of a sort of the political machinations that motivated the actors in the well-known story. Just for the fun of it, as we go along, I may throw in a bit of Purim Torah as well, some well-known or maybe not so well-known, I would say quasi-humorous interpretations, which perhaps we'll throw those in as we go along. So welcome to everyone. My name is Rashi Simon, Rabbi Simon, as my wife calls me. Or maybe that's only on Purim she calls me.
No, they can't see me.
We will begin at the beginning. I hope you have a text of the Megillah with you because it will enhance your appreciation of the Shiur tonight. If you don't have one, you can find it in the back of many Chumashim, certainly the Artsville Chumash, many other Chumashim as well. You'll find Megillah Esther there. You'll find it elsewhere also. If you don't find it there, certainly it's in the Tanakh. If you have a full Tanakh, you'll certainly find it as well. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh hamolech me'hodu v'ad Kush. It happened in the days of Achashverosh. He was the Achashverosh who ruled from Hodu until Kush. Hodu is usually understood to be India. Kush is possibly Ethiopia. Sheva Versimumea Medina, an empire that extended over 127 provinces. Again, very well known, but if we think about it, there are some notable anomalies here in this opening pasuk. Firstly, by way of Purim Torah, they say, how did you know that the Jews, or maybe all the good folk of Shushan, were hard of hearing? Because the Megillah begins by Achashverosh. Who? Achashverosh. They have to repeat it again because they couldn't catch it the first time. But of course, that's just in the realm of Purim Torah. Actually, what I want to point out is that the book of Esther does not identify Achashverosh initially as the king. It does not say Hamelech Achashverosh, nor does it say Achashverosh Hamelech, but it rather just identifies him by his name, by Achashverosh, and then it doesn't say he was the king, but it says he reigned, Mehodu v'ad Kush, as if the Megillah is telling us something not so much about the man himself initially, but rather the nature of his reign. Now, if he were to be called Hamelech Achashverosh, that would be a most let's say, honorable introduction. He's the king, and his name is Achashverosh. Or even Achashverosh, just mentioning his given name, and then Hamelech, identifying him as the king. It doesn't do that. It says Achashverosh, and then it says Hu Achashverosh Hamolech. Now, this, according to the Malbim, and much of that I'd like to share with you tonight derives from the Malbim. He suggests this hints to the fact that Achashverosh was not born to royalty, and we'll soon see how that fact helps to shed light on the whole opening episode of this drama. He was not born into royalty. Rather, he married into royalty. We'll soon see more details about that. So therefore, initially it says, he was a commoner called Achashverosh, but he seized the throne and he became the one who ruled Mehodu Kush. Now, his marriage into royalty explains his complex relationship with his wife Vashti. As of course we know, and we'll see because we're going to study tonight, he calls for Vashti, then he knocks her off. She refused to come, then he knocks her off. The point here is that Vashti was his ticket to the throne. Vashti, according to the rabbinic tradition, the Gemara Megillah says that Vashti was a granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the great Babylonian conqueror. He was the great emperor of Babylon, even to this day. He's recalled as the paradigm, the sort of exemplar of the might and the prestige of the Babylonian Empire. Saddam Hussein saw himself in the role of Nebuchadnezzar. By the way, the Persians, of course, succeeded the Babylonians and conquered the Babylonians. So Achashverosh was a Persian, and this story took place in Persia. The Persians vanquished or overcame the Babylonians, and therefore the Persians seized the throne and sort of supplanted the Babylonians. By the way, this ancient enmity has an echo today in the conflict between Iran and Iraq, in the conflict between the Shia and the Sunni Muslims, in the fact that Iran is trying to demonstrate its hegemony over the whole region. And of course, the Arabs are pushing back because the Persians are not Arabs. In case you don't know, the Persians hate the Arabs, and the Arabs hate the Persians. It goes back all the way to antiquity. So Achashverosh succeeded to the throne, but primarily because he married Vashti. Vashti was the granddaughter of royalty. Achashverosh was a commoner. With that in mind, we can also understand why it says in the next pasuk, "Ve'amim hahem keshevas hamelech Achashverosh." Now he's called the king Achashverosh. We're talking now where he is trying to consolidate his power, his hold over the throne. Al kisei malchuso, upon his throne, asher b'Shushan habira. The Megillah tells us his throne, the capital city, was Shushan habira. It was the capital city. Why the significance? What is the significance of that? Could you say asher b'Shushan? Or doesn't even have to tell us where it was. Why does the Megillah emphasize that as he was sitting on his throne, which was, by the way, in Shushan? And the answer is, again, because he was trying to establish his position, solidify his grip on the throne, and therefore he doesn't want to be thought of as just a successor to Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, but rather he wants to be regarded as a king in his own right, not just because he was born to royalty, but rather he's looking to establish, again, as we'll see, a totalitarian rule. Therefore, he moved the seat of the monarchy from Bavel to Shushan, and that's why it says, as he sat on his throne in Shushan Habira, and that furthermore explains what we have in Pasuk Gimel. Okay, that identifies here in the third year through a great party, Mishteh Gadol. Look in Pasuk Dalet, verse 4. Baharoso es osher kavod malchuso es yakar tiferes gedulaso. As he displayed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty. And you have to wonder, why the ostentatious display of wealth? Firstly, why did he do it? And why does the Megillah tell us that he did it? What's the purpose? What's the significance of the fact that he throws a party? This is a Mardi Gras, party to end all parties. So the answer is because a popular king is only the custodian of the royal treasury. And when he passes on, or when he abdicates, or when he is overthrown, then his successor also fills that role. And he, again, is the custodian of the royal treasury. The Queen of England, so sein gesund und stark, she is the queen, so the crown jewels, perhaps, or maybe not even, technically they belong to her. I'm not an expert in English law, I'm afraid. But surely she does not have the authority to visit the crown jewels, select a few that she wants to wear, or maybe barter, or maybe sell them at Sotheby's to raise a few million for some pet cause that she has in mind. She doesn't have the authority, the option to do that. Yes, in a way they belong to her, but they belong to the crowd. That's why Achashverosh wants to show that I'm not a popular king in the sense that I rule at the favor of the polity. He's a despotic king. He is a king who is the exclusive possessor of the royal treasuries. Now, I don't think that was a rarity in the ancient world. Again, in terms of modern Britain or even medieval Britain, such a thing I'm sure would be an outrage. But in antiquity, I don't think that was rare, that a king would claim personal right and possession, that he would regard himself as the possessor of the royal treasury. He's not just the custodian. That's what Achashverosh wants to show. That's what he displays, because it's his, it belongs to him. But he's crafty because he realizes that he needs the support of the populace, even if he wants to be a despot. But if people are plotting his downfall, he'll have a difficult time. So he needs to win their favor. He's got a plan for that as well. So he's displaying this great wealth, this ostentatious display of opulence, 180 days. Take a look at source. I'm sorry, not source, but pasuk hey. I mean, this is the source we're doing the whole shiur. So source pasuk hey. Uvimelos hayamim ha'ela, verse 5. Uvimelos hayamim ha'ela asa hamelech lechol ha'am animseim b'shushan abira. So he had this great, extended, lavish celebration that extended over 180 days. But that was for the cabinet, the ministers, the governors of the various provinces. That was for his the people who the prominent figures in government whose support he needs. But he realizes he needs the support of the polity as well, especially the locals. If they love him in Kush, in Ethiopia, but they hate him in Shushan, he's in trouble. So therefore, having had this extended party for 180 days, he sends them home. He sends home the satraps and the courtiers, etc. Or maybe he keeps them around. It's not exactly clear. But he has a further party. And that is Pasuk Ha'ila. When these days were finished, for everyone who lives in Shushan. It's not an exclusive party anymore, but now the doors are open wide to the palace, and all the good folk of Shushan are invited to celebrate for 7 more days. Look at the next words: Limigadol v'ad katan, from the great to the insignificant. Mishteh shivas yamim, 7 days of a wine fest. So at the one level, he opens it to everyone in order to win the favor not only of the powerful, but even the common man. He wants the commoner to support him as well. Because again, he knows the support of the powerful is crucial, but if he offends or antagonizes the masses, it's also not a healthy position. But there's something else as well. Migadovat Katan, from the point of view of Achashverosh, his projection, he's saying that before me, everybody is equal. I don't have a kind of hierarchy. I'm on the top. Underneath me is everybody. He's a kind of equalizer. So they're all subservient to Achashverosh, but at the same time, there's a kind of quasi-democracy here as well. Everybody is the same. Okay? So the common man possibly, is enjoying that. So the Megillah describes a bit further the trappings and the tapestries and the marble and the gold and the silver and the lavish, setting of this great party. And they were drinking from golden goblets, amazing. But now we have in Pasuk Tes, in verse 9, Gam Vashti HaMalka Asasa Mishtei Nashim. The Vashti, who was the queen, she also made a party for the women, Beis HaMalchus, in the royal palace, Asher LaMelech Achashverosh, which belonged to the king Achashverosh. Now there are some notable nuances here. Firstly, why does it even have to tell us that she made a separate party? I mean, he's the main man, it's his party, so of course we know that he's going to summon Vashti, but why does it have to say that Vashti made a party? Mishtei Nashim, she made a party for women. The implication is it's a second-rate party. That could be out of modesty. The men and women were not mingling. I don't know how alert to issues of feminine modesty the Persians were, but maybe that was the case. But at any rate, it was definitely a party for women only, as it says explicitly. But the Megillah highlights the fact that the party was in the royal palace, which belongs to Achashverosh, as if to say he allocated to his wife a space and maybe a budget to have a party for the women as well. But it's all at his pleasure, at his whim, because it says Asher LaMelech Achashverosh. But there's something else which is a subtlety that I think is quite significant and easily overlooked. Take a close look at Pasuk Tes that we've just read. Gam Vashti HaMalka. She's called Vashti and then the queen. In verse 11, again, Vashti HaMalka. But in Pasuk, and then, also in verse 16, take a look in verse 16. It says once more, Vashti Hamalka. In verse 17, again, Vashti Hamalka. Now, in those places, it's Vashti the queen. However, it is notable that in verses 12 and 13, or rather in 12, in Pasuk Yud Beis, in verse 12, V'tema'ein Hamalka Vashti. And again, in verse 15, Kidas Malatzos Bamalka Vashti. So, what we've observed, without going through each verse again, although we see the significance of it, is that sometimes she's called Vashti Hamalka, and sometimes she's called Hamalka Vashti. We could say, which no doubt at the simple level is so, they're synonymous, just different ways of describing her, identifying her. But I would like to suggest that to call her Hamalka Vashti, the queen who is Vashti, is a more exalted introduction than to call her Vashti Hamalka, because Vashti is her given name. Her parents called her Vashti, her classmates called her Vashti, her nanny called her Vashti. When she became the queen, so now she's Queen Vashti, queen putting her title before her name. When you say Vashti Hamalka, she's just Vashti, but she happens to be the queen. Now, of course, to be the queen is a very, exalted position. She's the top of the pyramid. But even so, Vashti Hamalka is not quite the same as Hamalka Vashti. Bear that in mind because we'll soon see the significance of it. So she's having a party, and then it says in Pasuk Yud, verse 10, Vayom HaShvi'i Ketov Lev HaMelech B'Yayin. On the 7th day, after the end of this further 7-day wine fest, Ketov Lev HaMelech B'Yayin, when he is inebriated, probably beyond sentient cognition, Amar, he said to these people, Muhuman, Bizasa, Charvana, Bigsa, Vagsa, Zeisa, Charpas, these people, Shivas Hasarisim, the 7 eunuchs, they were his, you could say, men in waiting, footmen or something like that. These were the 7 people who were on his personal staff. And he said to them, he said to them that they should go and bring Vashti the queen before the king, the Keser Malchus. Because he wanted to display her beauty. Now, the saying that she should come with the crown. Look, this is a state occasion. Naturally, she's the queen. Naturally, she'll wear the crown. Why specify she has to wear the crown? So here the rabbis say she should wear the crown, hints to the idea that she was wearing only the crown. She came completely naked except the crown. So he wants to show off her beauty, and this is consistent with the verse itself in verse 11, because he wants to show off to the people and to the officers, the ministers, her beauty, because she's very beautiful to look upon. So he wants to show her off, in the buff, wearing only the crown. And of course, that explains why in verse 12, she says to him, no way, Jose, as we used to say in America. But she refuses. Now here we see that she's called Hamalka Vashti for the first time. Previously, she's called Vashti Hamalka, and here Hamalka Vashti. The explanation, of course, is that initially he regards her as Vashti the queen. She's just Vashti, she's my wife. But when she asserts herself, when she says to her husband, the king, I'm not coming, I refuse. Now she's Hamalka Vashti. She's saying to him, I'm not just the queen because I'm your wife. On the contrary, I'm the queen inherently because I'm from royalty. You're the commoner. You're the upstart.
Yeah, Vashti was a royal queen, not
She was
him.
no longer
Vashti
Yeah.
was royal. She was the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, we mentioned. Vatimain hamalka Vashti lavo bidvar hamelech. She refuses Ashibiyat hasarisim. But the Megillah tells us she refused to come at the king's instruction, maybe because
Listen gives
she
us in
was
Shiur,
further
right?
humiliated because it was Biyad Hasarisim. The king didn't come for her himself. Maybe if he had bestirred himself to go in person and said, "My dear Vashti, you're so beautiful, you're so um, gracious, you're so charming. Come and spend a few minutes with the men in our party." Maybe she would have come with the crown, without the gown. She possibly would not mind, uh, the opportunity to display her assets. Maybe, but he instructed her to
Mm.
to come at the behest of the Sarisim. And take another
Sorry?
look, please, at Pasuk Yud Beis, verse 12. She refused to accede to the king's demand, because it was only through the hand of the eunuchs. This was an affront to the royal honor that he should send his footmen to summon her in such a way. And the pasuk continues by Sof Hamelech Ma'od v'chamaso ba'aravo. The king was very wroth, and his fury burnt within him. Now, this is a very strong turn of phrase, which I like the idea here that the Megillah says Achashverosh responded with fury and with anger, but you notice the two different expressions. Vaiksof Hamelech Ma'od, he was very wroth. Now, the word Vaiksof is related to the Hebrew word katsefet. Katsefet is cream that rises to the top. Like sof is that which is apparent on a person's face. Maybe he was screaming, very possibly. Like Sof HaMelech is very wroth, and his fury burned within him. But there's more than just anger and more anger. There here is something more subtle. There's outward anger and inner humiliation. He was angry that he displayed, but his humiliation was within, because actually she had foiled his plan. In fact, the Mefarshim say this idea that I mentioned about the crown, that she was coming only with the crown, this is well known. The Malbim says his idea was even more than that. She would come completely in the buff, just as she is, beauty queen. And he, Achashverosh, would put the crown on her head. So this would be, in his idea, an honor for her, but symbolically it would convey that he, Achashverosh, is the one who apportions power, prestige, authority to Vashti. And she was having none of it. She was not going along with his ploy, and therefore she has left him humiliated. And because she won't attend at his bidding, so he is furious and he's wroth, externally, and his humiliation burns within him. And now he has a serious problem. The serious problem that he has is that he wanted to seize totalitarian power, and he wanted to be the top dog, and she is just even like a sidekick for him. But the reality is that his grip on the throne is dependent, his ticket to royalty is dependent on Vashti. And therefore, he needs help out of this situation. He needs help in the sense of people who will realize and will be sensitive to his insecurity, but will also allow him to appear strong and like independent. So he wants to appear as if he doesn't need her, but in fact he does need her, and he wants to keep her around. And that's how I'd like to suggest the following verses of the Megillah can be understood. Let's take a look at Pasuk Yud Gimel now, verse 13. The king said to the wise ones, the ones who know the times, We'll explain that in a moment. This is the way of the king in the presence of those who are familiar with das is like protocol. The din, of course, is law. So there's protocol and there's law. And then we have an identifying V'hakarov, they're close to him. He's choosing his jurors or his judges or his advisors judiciously. He's choosing a bit like Donald Trump. Or all presidents who appoint people that they feel will be sympathetic to their agenda. And this is what he's doing as well. Etc. One of them is called Mumuchan, by the way. The last of them is called Mumuchan. Bear that in mind. These are Shiva Sarem Parasim Adai Roipane Amelach Rishim Rishona B'Malchus. These are his inner cabinet, and he's consulting with them. Kedas Balasos B'Malka Vashti. To know what to do with Malka Vashti, who refused to attend Al Mamar HaMelech Achashverosh B'Yad HaSarisim, through the hand of the eunuchs. Now the Sarisim are the ones who are they look after the harem. So they came for her like a girl from the harem. And that's why, of course, she refused. Now, pay close attention. Achashverosh is presenting his case before the Yodei Ha'itim and the Yodei Das V'Din. So the Chachamim Yodei Ha'itim are the ones who judge according to the circumstances. Yodei, who know the times. That is to say, they are sensitive to the context, to the personalities, to the implications. They are, you might say, politically astute, and they are the Yodei Ha'itim. They know the times. They judge cases between the king and the commoner. And the sentence depends on the time and the circumstances. Yodei Das V'Din are the ones who judge between commoners. Now, das means like nimus in modern Hebrew. Actually, nimus is what feeling may come from the Greek. But in any case, das is like protocol, manners, that which is culturally determined practice. Din is law. Now, Achashverosh consults these people for the following reason. He's ambivalent about Vashti. He still loves her, and perhaps he still needs her as well, as we've explained. And therefore, he tells the Yodei Ha'itim, the ones who judge between the king and the commoner, he says, you know what? I don't need you to judge this, because she is Hamalka Vashti. Again, take a close look at verse 15. Kedas Malo says, Bamalka Vashti, identifying her as the queen. Remember, we said Hamalka Vashti is a more exalted designation than Vashti Hamalka. And even though initially she was called Vashti Hamalka, then here Achashverosh himself says, hey, she's not just a commoner, she's Malka Vashti. So therefore, this judgment is among equals, is between equals.
I got it from the son and the house.
Therefore, he is hinting that he's looking for a more lenient judgment. And also by saying that she's Malka Vashti, he's hinting that after all, she was summoned by who? Not by the king directly, but by the eunuchs, B'Yad HaSarisim. And therefore, that's more of a reason to be lenient with her judgment, because she is the queen after all, and she was summoned in an ignominious way. So therefore, when she refused to attend, refused to answer the summons, she should be judged with leniency. Because, as I said, Achashverosh still loves her, and he still needs her as well. So that's why he's hinting. But it doesn't quite work out according to the plan of Achashverosh, because take a look immediately, the very next pasuk, verse 16. Now Mumuchan was the last of them, the least of them. He was the last of the seven. You look closely and you'll see that the name of Mumuchan is spelled here in a different way. That is to say, we pronounce it Mumuchan, but the way it's written by the Sofer in the scroll is, hopefully you may have it printed in your text that way as well, Mem Vav Mem Chaf Nun. In other words, it's what we call a Kri and a Ksiv. It is written in a different way than it's pronounced. We pronounce it Mumuchan because that's his name. We know that from before. But it's written Mumkan. And according to the sages, this hints to the fact that this Mumuchan was Haman. Mumuchan, Mumkan, there is a blemish here. Mum is a blemish. Kan here. So the name, his Persian name was Mumuchan. But the Megillah hints to the fact that this was really Haman by the fact that it's written here Mumkan. So he pipes up and he says before the king and the ministers, Lo ala melech levado avsa Vashti Malka. He will not let Achashverosh get away with it. He says that that she did not offend the king alone. Lo ala melech levado avsa Vashti Malka. But rather this is an offense to all of the ministers, all of the officials, all of the people throughout the empire of Achashverosh. Firstly, we also wanted to see her, in this burlesque act, and we didn't get the chance. But there's much more than that. It wasn't just their prurient interest in seeing her parading on the stage all together. It wasn't just that. Haman, according to Chazal, Haman was saying that if we let her get away with it, what will happen is that she is going to be setting a precedent, and all women throughout the empire will consider it acceptable to thwart or defy their husband's instructions. So the law of the land is that every woman is subservient to her husband's beck and call. But if the word gets out that Vashti refused the instruction of the king, then all women will do the same. That's exactly what we see. Look at Pasuk Yud Zayin, verse 17. The word will get out that from the queen to all the women to make their husbands contemptible in their eyes. But Amram, when they say that the king Achashverosh summoned her as Vashti Amalka lefanav v'lo ba. Now look how Mumuchan is subtly shifting her name. The king had said she's Hamalka Vashti, so she is entitled to maintain her dignity. Mumuchan turns it around. He says, no, she's just Vashti Hamalka. And even so, she refused. Then all other women are also going to refuse. And it says, it's going to be a much contempt and wrath. And therefore, he says we can't allow it. We can't allow her to go unpunished because it could have a ripple effect and create social tension and worse. Therefore, he's got a plan. In verse 19, if you like the idea, what you need to do is to seize totalitarian power, because Haman, Mumuchan, who is Haman, is conscious of the insecurity of Achashverosh and the power hunger of Achashverosh. He says, I've got an idea for you. What you should do is make a decree, a royal fiat that will go out throughout the land. And let it be written up in the laws and the bylaws of Parasumadai that the queen Vashti, that Vashti doesn't even call her the queen actually. Vashti doesn't even call her the queen at all. It just says Vashti refused to come before the king Achashverosh, and Achashverosh will give the crown, that is to say, assign the role of the queen to somebody else. And any woman should know that if she defies her husband's will, then he'll get another wife. He'll banish her and get someone else in. In verse 20, and all of the women, from the greatest to the least, will have to give honor to their husbands. Now, okay, the sexism here is quite obvious, but the women, I don't think, had voting rights in ancient Persia. I don't think anybody had voting rights, certainly not the women. And therefore, although this was possibly not popular with the women, but it was very popular with the men, and that's his power base. So Mumuchan was able to urge Achashverosh to issue this edict, this decree, which will be wildly popular with the men. But in order to make it work, you've got to knock off Vashti and make an object lesson of her and find somebody else. So in Pasuk Chafala, verse 21, the king liked it, the ministers liked it, but who's pulling the strings? Kidvar Mumuchan. It was his idea. He is credited with the idea, with the nefarious idea, recognizing, as we said, the insecurity of Achashverosh and the fact that Achashverosh is desperate to find a way, like a popular campaign, a popular edict that will win him the support and the power. By the way, this idea of the women showing utmost fealty and subservience to their husband is not in keeping with our culture, nor in Jewish culture as well, by the way, because a man has many duties towards his wife in Jewish culture. But I remember in the old JLE days, for anyone who goes back that long, when we started JLE in Little Venice many years ago. So it was about 25 years ago, a bit more actually, close to 30 years ago, when we had a certain program. We had two foreigners come, a man and a woman. They were from Saudi Arabia. This was before the great Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia, a man and a woman, and I think he was a policeman. Why they came to our Jewish event, I can't quite recall. This woman was so meek, so subservient. She wouldn't look, she wouldn't step, she wouldn't speak without getting her husband's permission. It was quite actually eerie to see, quite discomforting to see. It's almost as if she wasn't a person, as if she didn't have any independent capacity, of her own. So that's how it was. That's how it still is in some places, and that's how it was in ancient Persia as well, no doubt. And this is why this decree was very popular with the men. But again, as we've said, Achashverosh chose people who he tried to choose those who would be sympathetic to his insecurity, but it didn't quite work. But there's something else here as well, which is subtle and helps to lay the groundwork for the rest of the story. If you take a look at verses 16 and 17, which we've seen already, this decree. So Mumuchan wants to emphasize that you must punish Vashti, and Haman's thinking is that if Vashti is killed, Yichus pedigree will have no significance, because Achashverosh will have executed the one who really comes from the blue blood, from the royalty, and that is going to be therefore better for Achashverosh and better for me, for Haman himself as well, because if there's no clear right to the throne based on genealogy, if Achashverosh can seize the throne just because he's the right person or he's got the power and the cunning at that time, so Haman realizes he will have more influence as well, because there's a power vacuum which Haman can exploit, and then the king will be beholden to me, and I will be the power behind the throne. So this is the Machiavellian theme, the Machiavellian cunning here, in which Mumuchan plots to exploit Achashverosh's insecurity, but he does it in a way that Achashverosh actually likes. But as we'll soon see, Achashverosh is left with a serious problem. And the serious problem is that what will he do to replace her? So we've seen that Achashverosh has found one subject, one campaign, which is going to ride high. It's like the South American dictators who they say, law and order, give us the power and we'll restore safety to the streets or something like that. Or in Venezuela, I'm going to give power to the people and of course he brought agony and catastrophe to the people. Or the London mayoral candidates who are all promising to, make transport for London work and make the tubes run on time and they're going to be affordable and all of that, solve the transfer problem, congestion and pollution. We're going to solve it all. Well, okay, if anybody does, good for him. But the point is that by choosing an issue which is popular, he rides the issue high and then everything else is overlooked. Okay, so finally, the king likes it, and the plan is carried out in accordance with the Dvar Memuchan. By Shach Svarim, etc., they send messages throughout the land. And finally, look at the last pasuk in chapter 1. By Shach Svarim el Kol Medinos HaMelech El Medina Umedina Kichsavav El Avam Kushano. They send the messages, they send the edict, and they spread the word through all of the provinces, every language, etc. Every man will dominate his house, his household, and speak according to the language of his nationality. And this is the popular idea. It's more sexism. The men are loving it. The women don't vote anyway. And therefore, Achashverosh feels as if he has actually accomplished his objective. But the power behind the throne is pulling the strings. Because all of this is good until the morning. And let's take a look at chapter 2. By the way, we're not going to look at every pasuk in the whole Megillah with this detail. We won't have the time for that. But we're going to lay the groundwork for the dramatic events that follow. After these things, when the anger of the king has abated, Zachares Vashti, now he remembers Vashti, he remembers what was decreed about her, and he remembers, he remembers Vashti, he remembers what happened, what she did, and what was decreed against her. Now, the Malbim explains there are three discrete descriptions which are each significant. After these events, when the king has recovered from his intoxication, from his drunken stupor, and from his anger, he remembers Vashti, he remembers what she did, and she remembers what happened to her. He remembers Vashti, what exceptional qualities she had, how beautiful she was, how charming she was, how gracious she was, how talented she was. He remembers Vashti like a man remembers the love of his life. But then he remembers what she did. The problem is if he gets another woman of similar talent and similar, fine qualities, she'll also get uppity. She'll also want to assert her own authority. She'll also not be subservient, and he needs someone who's subservient to have the same problem. But not only that, he's got another concern as well. Poor Achashverosh, she's anxious about the other way as well. Nigzar aleha. Will he even be able to find a wife? Because all the women will say, who wants to marry that creep? The last girl that he had was beautiful, had yichus, pedigree, and everything. And look what happened to her. He knocked her off in a wine fest. No one may want to marry him at all if she fears for her life every time the king has a party. So that's what he remembers. And he's in a bind. Because the fact of the matter is, he does need Vashti. He doesn't feel secure on the throne on his own. Because people are going to say, who is this commoner who sees the throne? He has no right to even be there. He actually needed Vashti. And now he's executed her. What can he do? And he's in a bind. Who can he find? So they've got a plan. Vayomru na'arei hamelech, verse 2. Mishar Sav. Yivagshu lamelech naros besulos tavos mare. You know what you should do? You don't need to go to a shadchan. You don't need to make a political alliance. You're so powerful. You're so respected that you can choose a woman just based on beauty alone. Just physical attractiveness and pulchritude alone is a good word if you can spell it. You don't have to be concerned about any of the other trappings of prestige, etc. You're so powerful, just get the most beautiful girl in the land. That's their suggestion. We'll have a beauty pageant. The most beautiful virgins in the land. Now, this idea suits Achashverosh. Firstly, probably, the idea of marrying the most beautiful girl in the land appeals to him. But there's something much more subtle here as well. Because the problem we said was that if he gets someone of high birth, so she'll also get uppity, she'll also humiliate him. And if he gets a low life, someone who's, on the burlesque scene, or, I don't want to say who he might come up with, then it's going to be a disgrace if the king marries such a person. So he said their idea was just have a beauty pageant. You're not concerned with anything other than beauty. You have a Miss Universe pageant, or maybe Miss Persian Gulf. More sexism, of course. And this is why, although Achashverosh does marry Esther, as we all know, he wants to know what people she's from, but he never demands it. He never forces her. He never coerces her. He coaxes her. He's curious, but actually it suits Achashverosh that people don't know, because it suits his narrative that he's so powerful. He doesn't need to marry for political alliances. He doesn't need to marry for reasons of solidifying his control of the throne. And that's why, with regard to the problem number 3, which was maybe no one wanted to marry him, knowing what he did to Vashti. If you take a look at the next pasuk, pasuk Gimel, verse 3, Vayafked HaMelech B'Kidim. So the king appointed commissioners in all of the lands. Vayikbetsu, they gathered them. They didn't just have auditions. They didn't wait even necessarily for volunteers. They sought them out. If they won't come, so the Miss Universe competition will become a Miss Universe conscription, not a competition necessarily. And this is why it says the Ikbitsu will send commissioners, and they'll round up all the beautiful girls. Whoever's not interested, too bad. She'll come by force. Of course, this explains how it was that Esther came to be part of the harem, and how she became a contestant in this beauty competition. Of course, she never wanted to enroll in it. But okay, we'll skip a bit. If you take a look now in verse 10, Pasuk Yud, chapter 2, verse 10, Lo higida Esther's amabes moladata. She did not disclose her nation, her birthplace, that is to say, even her family. How could she get away with such a thing? They never even asked her. She didn't have to fill out a form. I mean, you can't even order a bottle of whiskey online without giving them your date of birth and things like that, if you want to get through security, they ask you your mother's maiden name, where you were born. And here she's going to be the queen. They don't ask her anything. Or they ask her, she doesn't have to tell. The answer is that it suited the system that the king needs to marry based on beauty alone. It suited his narrative, and especially it suited Mumuchan, who, as we said, is Haman. It suited Haman because Haman can be the power behind the throne if yichus and connections, family connections, are not essential. So that suits Haman very well, and that suits Achashverosh also. That's why she didn't tell, she didn't disclose it, and maybe they may have asked her, but they didn't insist upon it, and she was able to keep the secret. It's interesting the qualities that Esther had when we look at further on in this chapter. So look at Pasuk Tesvav. So beautiful, of course, she is, but it is evident that in addition to beauty, she has another quality. Maybe more than one, I'm sure, not only another quality, but another quality which is highlighted here, because she's not using the cosmetics, she's not ordering the most exclusive, expensive cosmetics that you might find, in Harrods or wherever it may be. You can see I'm not that expert in the subject. She didn't ask for anything. She just said, just give me the standard, whatever the one who's in charge of the women, whatever he allocates, that's fine for me. It's because possibly she didn't really want the job. She didn't want to win this competition necessarily. But in any case, take a look at verse 15. She didn't ask for any special jewelry or accoutrements or cosmetics. But he, nevertheless, Pati Esther no says chen be'enei kol ra'eha, but she evoked grace in the eyes of all who saw her. This is a beautiful word, chen, a beautiful Hebrew word that defies exact translation. It's normally translated as grace or charm. It refers sometimes to charisma, to warmth. It is some kind of quality which is especially magnetic in a woman uh, that evokes positive feelings in others towards her. And it's not exclusive to women, by the way. It says we have, in the case of a biblical figure, an earlier biblical figure as well. Noach matzah chen. Noach found favor. In fact, the name Noach is spelled nun ches, ches nun. By the way, later on, with the Purim Torah, later on it says, towards the very end, it says, no, v'noach me oivehem. The Jewish people were able to be at rest from their enemies. V'noach me oivehem. So somebody asked, how did Noach get into the Megillah? Noach, he's in Bereshis. How did he get into the Megillah? So they said, because Haman wanted a gallows, and he found a gallows, very tall gallows. He found a gallows that was 50 cubits high. 50 cubits is about probably about 25 meters high. Tall gallows. Where did he get it from? When he looked around for a piece of wood, piece of lumber like that, you can't just get it at Wicks. They didn't have that sort of convenience. So he looked around. He found one in the book of Bereshis when Noah was building the ark. So he had also a beam of 50 amos. So he wasn't going to buy his own. He was going to nick it from him. So he went to the lumber yard and he started to haul it out. Well, Noah got wind of it. Noah pulled on to the other end, but Haman was strong. So he pulled it very, very powerfully, and he pulled Noach right into the Megillah. So that's why I got Noach me'oiveim into the Megillah. Noach matzah chen. Of course, the word chen is related to the word chinam. Chinam means for free, without a basis, without payment. In other words, Noach evoked chen because he had some quality which possibly went beyond his righteousness in the case of Noach. And the same may be true for Esther as well. Of course, she was righteous, and of course, she was beautiful, and of course, she was charming, and of course, she was gracious. But she had some magnetic quality, a quality that evoked a sense of pleasure, a sense of admiration, and an attraction in people. As I said, it's not only women, Noah had it as well, but it is a feminine quality with which she was endowed, and therefore, even without the cosmetics, etc., but she evoked this chen. They have, if you take a look at the Pasuk Yud Zayin, they have Hamelech es Esther mikol hanashim, that he, the king, loved Esther for more than all these other women, but he sachein bechesed lefanav, and she evoked chen before him. And he said to her, "You're the girl, you're the bride, you're the queen." And again in Pasuk Yud Ches, Vayas Hamelech mishte gadol ves lechol tzara v'avadam es mishte Esther v'hanachal medino sasa. So he made a great party. They call it mishte Esther. I've got to tell you another Purim joke. It says that who was the mother-in-law of Achashverosh? Who was Achashverosh's mother-in-law? So you say, well, I don't know. It doesn't say in the Megillah exactly who is his mother-in-law, but no, we do, because it says Chamaso va'aravo, because Chama means anger, but also means mother-in-law. Whether there's a connection to that, I'll let you ponder. Chamaso va'aravo, so she's called Va'ara. But it says elsewhere, the Chamaso shachacha, later on says the Chamaso shachacha, his anger abated. So was his mother-in-law shachacha, or was his mother-in-law va'aravo? Of course, the answer is, of course, he had two mothers-in-law because he had two wives. He had Esther and he had Vashti, so he had two mothers-in-law. But actually, it could be that Vashti also alone, he may have had two mothers-in-law just from Vashti, because it says Gam Vashti asasa mishtei nashim. She was made from two women. So since she had two mothers, so therefore Achashverosh had two mothers-in-law. But actually, I just mentioned one other joke, tangentially related to Megillah, that they are thinking of repealing the Takana of Rabbeinu Gershom that a man can only marry one wife. He's let him marry more than one because it's hard to get by on the salary of one father-in-law. And this is what the younger light have suffered from as well. So they're thinking of repeating. Okay, this is all just errant humor in the spirit of Purim. But more seriously, take another look at Pasuk Yud Ches, verse 18. Vayas hamelech mishte gadol l'chol tzarav avadav. He made a great party. That's mishte Esther v'hanachal lemedinos sasa, and he offered a tax discount for the medinos. What's the meaning of that? So partly, again, lowering taxes are always going to be very popular. How he'll balance the books, I don't know. Later on at the end, of course, he has to impose a tax. But in the meantime, it's party time, so he's lowering the taxes. But the Malbim says that his plan was to say to Esther, we're doing tax credits now, tax rebates and that sort of thing. Tell me who your family are. Tell me who your tribe is, and I'll do something extra for them. It was part of his way of coaxing her, sort of incentivizing her. Tell me who your people are. Actually, you're very talented. You're very gorgeous. You're very able. You evoke chen, like we said. So who are your family members, your relatives? We'll do something for them. It's like in the United States, probably here in Britain, similar as well. If a senator or a governor becomes the president from whatever state it is, so it's advantageous for that state. It's advantageous for their economics, and for other benefits will flow to them. So if your local MP, becomes a cabinet minister or becomes the prime minister, it frequently brings benefits to the local polity. So, but Esther is not going to go for the gambit in Pasuk Chaf. But she does not disclose it. Of course, later on, we know the importance of not disclosing it. She's able to reveal to the king who she is and who her people are just at the critical moment. I know our time is almost up because I do want to end by 9 or nearly that. So let's just see how the story unfolds from here just a little bit further. Vayamim ha'im, verse 21, Pasuk Chaf Alav. In those days, Mordechai Shib B'Shah HaMelech Katzaf Bigsan V'Seresh. These two chamberlains, they decided to hatch a plot to assassinate the king. Mordechai, who was one of the ministers of the king, would, I suppose, be present in the palace and the corridors of power, overheard this plot. According to our tradition, he spoke all the languages, and therefore he was able to understand them. In verse 22, Mordechai became aware of it. Vayaged Esther Hamalka, and he told Esther about it. Vatoma Esther Lamelech b'shem Mordechai, and she told the king in the name of Mordechai. This is the source, by the way, of the famous tradition that one who repeats a teaching or information in the name of the one who said it, that is to say, one who attributes wisdom or important information correctly to the one who provided that information, rather than plagiarize or claim it's one belongs to one's own wisdom. Maybe Gulal Olami brings redemption to the world. So Esther told the king about this plot in the name of Mordechai. The Mordechai was her source of information, and the matter was investigated, and sure enough, it was true, and they were executed. And it was written in the Chronicles before the king. Very good. So far, so good. Actually, we don't have any problem. I mean, Vashti has a problem, but the Jews are okay up to this point. But now is when things take a turn for the worse. In the beginning of chapter 3, the king promoted Haman. Who is Haman? Why was he promoted? What's the relevance? So according to the tradition that Mumuchan is Haman, so we're not surprised because he's pulling the strings. But whatever the background to it is evident that the rise of Haman is somehow connected to what happened before, because this is after these things. So it's been suggested, and I would like to present this as part of my theory, my approach, that Haman was like Goebbels in the Nazi, Yamach Shemo, in the Nazi hierarchy. He was in charge of propaganda. So Haman, it says it was written in the Divrayim Lifnei HaMelech, what happened, that it was Mordechai who saved the king's life, but in the public image, according to the propaganda of the press, it was Haman who took credit for it. So since Haman took credit for it, so that explains why he was elevated. And that explains why later on, much later, which is the true turnaround point, when the king could not sleep. Let's just skip, because our time is short. Let's skip to verse 6. Balayla hahu. Nadadash nas hamelech. This is the critical, the climactic, the crucial fulcrum on which the Megillah turns. At that night, the king's sleep was disturbed. You sing it in the way I just did, or probably much better than I just did, to evoke the sound of the chazan on Yomim Noraim. Hamelech refers here to the King of Kings. The king's sleep was aroused, so to speak. Hashem began the process of the redemption. And the king could not sleep, and he asked him to bring the chronicles before him. And they read the chronicles, and that's when he learned that it was Mordechai, because he was under the impression that it was Haman who was the informant who saved the king's life. And then he began to think, if Mordechai really saved me, and I never rewarded him. If I don't reward people who are close to me, who do favors for me, they won't do favors anymore, and I'm going to lose my popularity. And therefore, he was worried, and that is why he began. He said, "Well, we've got to do something for him." Verse 3. What glory was given to him? What prestige? What honor was bestowed upon him? And the king's personnel said, "We do anything for him." Now the king is worried. Of course, this sets the stage for the king's party, and then the Haman leading Mordechai through the streets, and then the second party, and of course, downfall of Haman. I'd just like to end with a last thought. If you take a look at chapter 6, verse 13, Yud Gimel, and we'll end with this. Now, at this point, Haman, after the first party, Haman was in a great mood. But now, after the humiliation of leading Mordechai through the streets, his arch enemy on the king's horse and all of that, now he is in a bad mood and he's feeling really down. And it says, and the Haman related to his wife and to all of his good friends, what happened to him. Now listen what they say to him. His good friends, his family, his wife, and his those who love him. So his wise advisor and his wife Zeresh, she said to him, if this Mordechai is from Jewish stock, you begun to fall before him, you will not be able to overcome him. You're a goner. Now you have to wonder, what kind of a shrew is she that when her husband is down, rather than lift him up, she kicks him further. She says to him, if your nemesis is from Zerah Yehudim, you've started to fall before him, then forget it. You're going to go all the way down. The answer is that the world works as a kind of cycle. Galgal chozer ba'olam. Sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. It's like political fortunes, even here in Britain, the Conservative Party, the Labour Party. You've got in America as well, the Republicans were up, but now they're tearing themselves apart. That's how it is. That's how it is even in ancient Persia. That's how life is. Sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. What they said to Haman was, if the Jewish people are your adversaries, so the Jewish people are likened to the moon that waxes and wanes. Malchus based David, Zerah Yehudim, waxes and wanes. If the Jews, Mordechai and his tribe are on the way up, that means you're on the way down. The way to overcome it, the way to persevere is to go all the way down. Now, and then you can come back up. In other words, you can't fight destiny. You've got to go all the way down if need be, and then you can begin to come back up. Unfortunately for Haman, he never did come back up. He only went up on the gallows, 50 cubits high, and that was the demise of Haman, and that is the meaning of the advice that they gave. Now, people, the Fanav, And I will just end with that thought and say that may the cycle of Jewish history reach its denouement, and may the Malchus-based David and the descendants of Malchus Yehuda be restored to a position of influence and authority over the Jewish people and indeed over all of the world with the arrival of Mashiach, B'mehera v'yameinu amen. So that is the end. You know, they say, just one last joke, they say when Mashiach comes, the Shiurim will never end because the Shiur always ends, the drush ends, B'mehera v'yameinu amen. Once Mashiach comes, you've got nothing to say. The Shiur will never end, the drush will go on and on. But currently, we have a way to end every drasha, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. I mean, if any questions, then I'm happy to take them. I want to thank everyone for joining. Wish everyone a wonderful Purim, exuberant Purim, a safe Purim. The timing, the circumstances impose some limitations on us this year, but in Mitzvah Hashem will still be a Purim that we will greatly enjoy, and it will be the transformation from gloom to bloom. Mitzvah Hashem in the weeks ahead, and we look forward to only sharing good news together. Any questions or comments? Akasha, you can unmute if the host will allow it, then we're good to go.
Could I ask one? Thank you, wonderful Shiur, and I love your expression as usual. Is so eloquent and beautiful.
You're very kind, Esther.
So what's my question? Yeah, why? If it was 11 months from the time of the lottery till the next Adar,
yes.
Why did Mordechai want her to go then, and he couldn't wait another few weeks till she thought she might be called by the king?
I see. It's a good question. I suppose that Mordechai felt that at the time when the decree was first issued and the Jews were the most desperate and their prayers were heartfelt, that is when Esther needed to harness that energy and approach the king. At the end of the day, if the king had just summoned her by the by, he would not have had the same drama. He would have called her for his reasons, which probably did not relate to saving, the Jewish nation. Probably related to something a lot, of a lower level. So it's true that she was reluctant and there was a risk factor, but I think Mordechai wanted to strike while the iron was hot, even to the point that when she prevaricated, then he said, look, if you won't do it, then we'll get somebody else. Hashem will save his people through some other means.
Right.
But that's a very good question because, as you say, the dramatic part of the story with the fasting and then the feast and the banquet and the party and all of that took place according to the chronology at Pesach time, when actually the critical event itself was only going to happen much later. I think he wanted to harness that power and that sense of urgency. Otherwise, the Jews themselves would have said, you know what, a few weeks have passed, nothing has happened yet, we'll find an Eitzah, we'll go to ground or something like that. I think when the urgency was felt throughout the Jewish world, that was the time to strike. A very good question, I like it.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, so again, thank you to everyone. And
just a comment for the Rav. Comment for the Rav. Many years ago, I had a student from Indonesia, and her name was Vashti.
Is that right?
And I said to her, "You have a very interesting name. I'm Jewish, and it's the name of a queen." I didn't even tell her I'm Jewish. I said, "It's the name of a queen." She said, "I know."
I see. Well, I'm sure that she fared better in your course than her namesake did in the Book of Esther.
Did you pass her?
Actually, there is a town, I think in Minnesota, called Vaizata. For years, I thought that it was after Vaizata from the Book of Esther. Then it turned out to be a Native American name.
I see. Interesting. I like it. Yeah, in the Midwest, they have a lot of the Native American. My hometown as well, my home state. My state is called Indiana. And although my hometown is named for a French general, Lafayette, but many of the towns and the hamlets and the farming communities are named for Native American Indians. Yeah, interesting.
That was a very interesting Parish you gave on the comment of Vashti, because I've always found it enigmatic, that line that she says, if he's from the Jews, you're gonna fall. I've always found
yes, Zeresh, you mean, not Vashti, Zeresh, who was the wife of Haman. Yes. Yeah, that's right. So that's how I would explain it. That even though I said that really life itself is a cycle, the cycle of life, but especially the Jewish people, our destiny is one of waxing and waning. The Jews definitely do not always win, but we are good at surviving. And that, of course, is Malchus based David. David HaMelech himself, in his own career, he was a survivor. He didn't win every battle, but he was a great survivor. And that exemplifies the Jewish people. Sometimes we're up and sometimes we're down, just like the cycles of the moon itself. So that's how we can explain what she says. You've got to go all the way down, then you can come up. But of course, in his case, he only went up to the gallows. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
Everyone, Purim Sameach.